this on. Is this on? Okay. Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. Good morning. Okay. Welcome to the 2023 National Native Seed Conference. Yeah, woo! Good morning. I'm Alexis Larsen. I'm the lead organizer for this event. As most of you have heard from me in the last few weeks and months. This is the 5th National Native Seed Conference, but it's been 5 years since we had the last one, and we at the Institute for Applied Ecology are very excited to welcome you here today. Let me grab this actually. Okay. I'd like to start by giving a huge thank you to our planning team, both from the Institute for Applied Ecology and the Natural Areas Association. A lot of them are here this week, so if you see them wandering around, please say hello. I'd also like to give a big thanks to our sponsors that are here today, including Bureau of Land Management, the U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Hedgerow Farms, Natural Areas Association, United Plant Savers, and the National Wildlife Federation. And then I'd also like to give a big thank you to yesterday's field trip and workshop organizers. Thank you for organizing those events. I think they were very well received from what I've heard. And while we haven't had a chance to gather in the last 5 years, this feels like a particularly timely meeting for many reasons. This conference brings together people from every link in the native seed supply chain. We're excited to welcome attendees who are representing growers, researchers, restoration practitioners, seed collectors, seed bankers, and more. From breaking dormancy to breaking ground, our program offers something for everyone. We are the right people at the right place at the right time. This event follows closely behind the release of the Assessment of Native Seed Needs and Capacities, a National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Mathematics report that presents an overview of the native seed supply chain, preliminary observations of the challenges facing native seed use and supply, and a strategy for additional information gathering. We hope this conference will provide a venue for continuing these conversations and sharing of information that you can take home to your agency or organization. And when I see groups of people like this gathered together from different sectors of the native seed supply chain, I think of partnership. Partnership is how we tackle our biggest problems. Partnerships create opportunities for knowledge to merge with capacity, and partnerships are how ideas become reality. There are many members of partnerships here today, so many that we had to host multiple concurrent sessions to provide space to discuss their successes and challenges and lessons learned. If you aren't a member of a regional seed partnership, consider seeking out your representatives from your region this week to learn more or learn about establishing your own in your own ecoregion. If you are a member of a regional seed partnership, we'd like to collect some information from you for our new Native Seed Network website that we'll be launching later this year. And we can, if you could stop by the registration desk anytime this week. Moving on to a few housekeeping items. We have a really packed schedule over the next 2.5 days. We'll begin today with opening plenaries from Dr. Tom Kaye of Institute for Applied Ecology and Tracy Stone Manning of the Bureau of Land Management. After a morning break, we'll move to our first concurrent sessions, including regional seed partnerships, genetic approaches to inform forb restoration, wildfire and seed-based restoration, regional native seed production, and seed-based restoration. We will be providing lunch for you all today. It's Taco Tuesday. That will be at noon, and we have an extra long lunch to provide an opportunity to connect with each other. After lunch, we have 2 sets of concurrent sessions, followed by our poster session and social. There will be snacks and a no-host bar at the poster session, and the bar will accept cash or card. And then during your breaks, please make sure to visit our exhibitor booths out in the foyer and the registration area. We also have a couple of seed-based games in the registration area, a crossword puzzle, and a Guess the Native Seed from a couple different regions. And then a few tips and tricks for the Whova app. If you haven't already, we highly recommend downloading this app. You can do so with the QR code here. We also have that available at registration, and you can ask for some assistance at the registration desk. You can access the agenda from the menu on the lower banner, and when you save sessions to your own agenda, it's simply a way to bookmark them for easier access for you for planning your day, and there's no requirement to register for these sessions for the rest of the week. Additionally, you can find the community boards in that menu. If you have conference questions, you can ask them there at the Ask Organizers Anything board. You can also visit registration desk. And then also a lot of folks have opened up discussion topics and meetup suggestions there as well. So it's a great way to connect with other attendees. And if you scroll down from the homepage, you'll find additional resources. You can visit our virtual sponsor and exhibitor booths, read about speakers, and upload photos. And you can also find polls created by speakers for their specific sessions, as well as conference polls that will open up later in the week. The logistics session, also in the additional resources areas, has information on dining out and the Show Your Badge program. We've partnered with Visit Alexandria to bring you this program, which provides discounts on local area restaurants when you show your conference badge. You can find the website there and the list of restaurants in the logistics center. And we also have some coupons available and guides for Alexandria at the registration area. Oh, yes, and then there's a list of the restaurants as well. And then if you haven't already, please fill out the photo release form with this QR code. We also have that at the registration desk, and we also have some paper forms to fill out as well. And then finally, we have the U.S. Botanic Garden reception tomorrow evening. If you have a ticket, please pick that up at the registration desk on Wednesday by 3:20, which is the end of the afternoon break. And after that break, we'll start giving tickets away to the wait list. And now I'd like to ask Tom Kaye to come up here.
Thanks very much, Alexis. And I want to welcome all of you here today. I'm Tom Kaye. I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for Applied Ecology. As Alexis said, this is the 5th time we've held this conference. We had a gap of 6 years. It was in large part due to the pandemic, so we're really glad to be back on our feet. We did hold a virtual conference last year that we thought would be kind of a small conference for about maybe 80 people from a couple of local seed partnerships. And we had 500 people sign up for a virtual conference. So there is a lot of demand for this topic and a lot of need out there for all of us as a group to get together and share ideas and move forward our way to heal the world through restoration with native seeds. So I am going to give a land acknowledgement right now, and I want to acknowledge Dr. Christina Eisenberg for her efforts to help us with this today. Christina is the Associate Dean of Inclusive Excellence and Director of Tribal Relations at the Oregon State University College of Forestry. So thank you, Christina. We're committed to taking people and the institutions with whom we work beyond the land acknowledgement to find ways to support and empower Native Americans and their communities. We gratefully acknowledge the Native peoples on whose ancestral homes we're gathered today, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their home here today. We acknowledge that the ancestors of recognized Virginia tribes who have lovingly stewarded these lands for millennia, including the Rappahannock, Pamunkey, Upper Mattapony, Chickahominy, Eastern Chickahominy, Nansemond, Monacan, Mattapony, Patawamak, Nottoway, were forcibly removed from these lands. We value the long and deep interactions they have with the land and aspire to find ways to honor and manifest that value in our work and life and help heal the damage done by settler colonialism. We commit to practicing inclusive seed collection and habitat restoration so we can contribute to the decolonization of conservation. Thank you. At this point, I get to introduce Lisa Smith. Now, I want to give some background here. We have been putting this conference on for several times, but during the pandemic, we had some staff turnover, lost some institutional memory and knowledge on how to put on this conference even. And so we reached out to the Natural Areas Association, who puts on their conference every year, as a way to bolster our capacity and skill set and relearn how to do a conference like this. And we're just so grateful that the Natural Areas Association was able to step in and help us with this. And so it's with that great pleasure that I thank the staff from Natural Areas Association, especially Amy Wills and Maura, I'm blanking on your last name. McGinty-Class, sorry, I'm just so used to calling you Maura. Lisa is the executive director of the Natural Areas Association, having served in several leadership positions with NAA prior to beginning her role as the ED in 2013. Lisa is a trained field ecologist whose career began with the Pennsylvania Natural Heritage Program and then as the director of stewardship with the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. As a consultant, Lisa worked for 15 years with numerous partners on projects related to wild plant and natural areas management and conservation, including the Land Trust Alliance, in her effort to assist land trusts in the Mid-Atlantic region to build and strengthen their land stewardship programs. Lisa's education includes a Bachelor's of Science in Biology from Juniata College, a Master's of Science in Botany from Miami University, and a Master's of Science in Secondary Science Education from Duquesne University. So Lisa, please come up. And please welcome Lisa.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Alexis. It is our great pleasure to be with you here today to, right with our partners, the Institute of Applied Ecology, to welcome you to the 2023 National Native Seed Conference. We are a proud partner in the organization of this event. As Tom said, I'd throw this right back at you. We've been completely honored to be a part of it. We've attended this event in the past. It's important to our people, and so to be working in tandem with the Institute for Applied Ecology has been a great opportunity. So with that, I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge all of the hard work that went into the planning. In particular, I would like to acknowledge Tom and Alexis, their leadership over the past 8 months, and this conference was pulled together very quickly. And your hard work, and the hard work of the IAE team, the entire team made this event possible. So I'd like for everybody to give this team a round of applause. Thank you, thank you. Like all of you, I'm eagerly anticipating the next few days. I'm sure you're feeling the same way that I am. There's nothing more inspiring than being in a place with almost 500 individuals who are passionate about and committed to making informed decisions that result in conserving and restoring nature through the use of native plant materials. The conference agenda is rich and in relevant and timely content with the latest information in seed research, partnerships, policy, restoration, and the list goes on. The Natural Areas Association is a partner in this conference because we know that access to quality science, resources, and best practices is essential to success on the ground. For those of you who may be new to our organization, we are a communications and outreach organization committed to providing high-quality, practical resources and educational programming to land management practitioners specifically. We do this in a variety of ways, from our webinars, our symposia, our in-person workshops, and as Tom mentioned, our Natural Areas Conference and the Natural Areas Journal. Those are 2 flagship programs you may be familiar with. Our goal is to help all of you move the needle in restoring and sustaining resilient, functioning ecosystems that harbor North America's biodiversity. So we invite you to join us when you are seeking access to timely and practical timely and practical resources, as well as an opportunity to connect with your peers, because we believe that together, when we come together, we learn the most. Everyone gathered here, and many who were not able to join us, knows that the availability and distribution of seed is critical to the protection of natural ecosystems, made only more difficult in a rapidly changing climate. And while this is a great challenge, we are inspired by the many and diverse strategies emerging at multiple scales and in a wide variety of landscapes. Finding solutions will take all of us working together, advocating for and advancing the availability and strategic use of native seed as we work towards our common goal of conserving and restoring ecological functions to landscapes. Creating opportunities offered by non-governmental organizations like the Institute for Applied Ecology and the Natural Areas Association requires financial support and leadership at its highest levels. To that end, I would like to take this opportunity to publicly thank partners like the Bureau of Land Management's Plant Conservation and Restoration Program, the USDA Forest Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and many other institutions for supporting our work and by advocating for and funding so many efforts that make a real difference on the ground, both on federal lands and non-federal lands. NAA has been a part of the movement to protect biodiversity for 50 years, and seed has always been a part of the conversation. And what we've witnessed over the course of those many years is that when passionate practitioners come together in these kinds of forums, in person and virtually, together we elevate the work that we all do. We share, we learn, we take new knowledge to our landscapes, and it's only through these individual, often very isolated actions that we take that change begins to occur on a grander scale. Enjoy this time together, get energized for all the important work ahead, and there will be a lot of it. NAA is honored to be with you for this conference and to support your efforts for the next 50 years. Together we make a difference. Thank you.
All right, put my coffee right there. Think that's safe? Sure, what could go wrong? All right, wake up my computer. I'm gonna try to do this crazy thing where I follow my slides on my computer while you follow them. So we're gonna advance the slides here. I'm guessing it's the big green triangle. Alexis, can you help me get to my slides? One more? There we go, one more and one more. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. See, this is why you have other people come in from other conference builders and help you out. So I'm going to give you a discussion this morning on restoring a changing world, and every seed is a wish. And before we get going, though, I need to acknowledge all of you. Because, here we go, we're going to do that. We're going to try this. That doesn't work. There we go. Check it out. This is where you're from. We have almost 500 people here today registered for this conference. That blows my mind. I thought we'd have between 200 and 300, but we have almost 500. It shows pent-up demand and also growth in our industry and our topic. A lot of attention here is being put into this. We have people from, we call this the National Native Seed Conference, but it really hasn't always been international. This year we have 8 different countries represented, 47 out of the 50 states. This is very wall-to-wall. We're covering this topic extremely well. I would like to ask those of you who have been to one of these conferences before to please raise your hand. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. We've got great return. And, of course, great growth with new people. I'd also like to ask those of you who are seed producers, collectors, nursery people, seed producers, to raise your hand. We are an industry group. Thank you. We're an industry group, but we're also a practitioner group. So please raise your hand if you're a practitioner of putting seeds on the ground in particular. Thank you. And lastly, please raise your hand if you're with a government agency. Look at the diversity we have here. This is unlike most conferences this way. We have this wonderful crosscut between industry and application and policy. I'm just so thankful that all of you can come and be part of this, because together, this is where we make a difference. Because we tell each other what we need, we argue over the details, and we make progress. So thank you. All right, today I've got 3 main messages for you, and we'll go through these in some detail. We need to act faster to address climate change and restoration. Climate change is progressing at an accelerated pace, faster than many of us thought, many scientists thought. And we need to be bold in our response. Partnerships are key to getting seeds available. Partnerships like the native seed partnerships that are sprouting up all over this country. And we'll get into that in a little bit. This conference is for you if you're part of a native seed partnership. This is where we meet and share ideas. Native seed partnerships were unheard of 20 years ago, and today there are many throughout the country. And we're actually trying to get our arms around how many there are and who's participating. So this is an opportunity today, this week. And then finally, there are government initiatives and policies that have a rare opportunity right now. Because of the administration and the kinds of fundings that's coming out. So we need to take advantage of that and help focus it with some laser focus on some of these topics, so it's not dispersed across the usual things, but made into something new as well. Skipping 2 slides isn't working so good. So first off, focus on the background of this slide. It's a pretty meadow, lots of flowers. And often when public and even people in agencies, our colleagues, think about botany, they just think of, well, it's some pretty wildflowers, and that's kind of nice for them. Maybe some people will enjoy that. But, you know, it's more than that. Plants are the base of the food chain. On top of this picture is the Calvin cycle. This is the biological mechanism through which plants convert sunlight into energy and oxygen. This is what drives all life on the planet. So plants aren't just some pretty things that occur here and there. They're the reason we can live. And if we don't take care of them, they won't take care of us. So I really want to underscore how passionately I feel about maybe how misunderstood the topic of plant conservation often is. This isn't something we do to feel good about it. This is something we do to survive. So plants are at the center. They are at the center of human health, of ecosystem health, and habitat restoration. And the recent assessment of native seed needs and capabilities that was put out by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine quotes this way: "Conserving and restoring the integrity of native plant communities has emerged as an important, if neglected, ecological need." Truer words have never been spoke. This is both true that this is an important need, but it's also been neglected. And so that's one of the reasons with the policies that are coming from our current administration and the funding needs to be focused on this problem so we can end that neglect. The work we do with native seeds seems very focused on plants, but of course it needs to be inclusive of people. Without including people, people won't care. We need to make this about humans as well. That it's critical. We need to decolonize conservation, decolonize it for indigenous peoples and everyone in our country. So this is accessible, it's a partnership, we respect sovereignty, we show individuals as part of our landscape, both historically and today. And we have a lot to learn from our indigenous cultures, and it's not their responsibility to teach us, it's our responsibility to learn from them. So human health. one of the things that is practically a truism is that going for a walk in the woods is a good way to de-stress. We all know that. It's like, I'm maxed out, I need to go for a walk, and I'm going to go among the trees. Well, it's clinically proven, of course, also, that contact with nature is good for human health. It reduces our blood pressure, reduces our stress and our anxiety, depression. It's good for us. We know this. Benefits to exposure to nature can even be given to people who are incarcerated. If you're in prison, just being shown imagery of nature can reduce events of violence and improve inmate safety and officer safety. We feel also when nature is lost a grief for that loss of nature. There's a term for this, solastalgia, that when we're in nature, we love being in nature, but when we see nature damaged and gone, we feel grief, and it hurts us, at least me, and I suspect all of you can understand that pang of regret we sometimes feel when we pass a landscape that's been just damaged beyond recognition. But it goes beyond human mental health and into human physical health. Habitat restoration can put the biological, the microbiome back on the landscape that's better for humans. There's a hypothesis called the old friends hypothesis, that we have evolved with a microbiome around us that contains beneficial microorganisms. And when ecosystems are damaged, those microorganisms are diminished and pathogenic microorganisms become much more abundant. But when we restore landscapes, we can restore those beneficial microorganisms. And there's strong evidence for both the pathway to restoration and the improvements to human health, to the point where there's a lot of encouragement to put native plants and diversity back into city parks so that folks who live in dense urban areas can open their window, nature will blow in and get on them and make them better. So native plant diversity is also a key to how we do this. It's not just the abundance of biomass, but the diversity of plants that achieves what we're after here. So on the left, these are two both seminal papers published in Nature, the most preeminent biological journal in the world. On the left is a paper by David Tillman showing that as the number of species increases in experimental plots, the variation in biomass production over time goes down. In other words, biomass production stabilizes, becomes more predictable, and isn't as vulnerable to the swings that go on during different weather events, which can make good years, but also terrible years. As you have diversity, you buffer that so that you have constancy and stability. And because primary productivity, which is what we're talking about here, is primary to life on Earth, this is a crucial finding. We need biological diversity. It's not just because we like to see pretty flowers. It's because it's what drives the health of the planet. On the right, there's a figure, and I'm not sure you can read all of it, but the point is, in the middle is plant diversity. This is from an experimental project conducted in Germany. And plant diversity, as plant diversity increases, it affects the soil microbiome, all the organisms in the soil, and it also affects all of the other food web components above plants. Carnivores, pollinators, herbivores, everything. Even invasive species. All of those groups are positively correlated with the diversity of native plants, except for invasives. They're negatively correlated. So as native plant diversity goes up, we protect these ecosystems from weed invasions, which tend to monotonize the environment, tend to take over and make fewer and fewer species. They tend to reduce diversity. So we know that if we're going to do restoration, that local adaptation matters. We can't just take a seed from anywhere and plant it anywhere and expect it to do well. This is biology. This is how natural selection works. And on the right here is a figure that shows you where many common gardens have been grown in the United States. And this is from a paper by Bauman and Beth Ledger, who I think are here today. Yep, over there, thank you. So big plug for our paper here. And what this paper showed was that if we look at over 300 studies of common gardens that relate to species that grow in the Great Basin of the U.S. and arid land, that there's variation between populations of source plants in 95% of those studies. So this shouldn't be unexpected. This is the grist of evolution. Plants vary from place to place. Okay, well, that's useful, but that doesn't tell us about local adaptation necessarily. But 86% of those studies where we could look at that question show trait by environment variation. In other words, the variation that occurs from place to place appears to be related to something in their environment. And 75% of those are driven by climate. Climate is the dominant driver for why plants vary from place to place. It's not the only driver, but it is the dominant driver. And then finally, the question of local advantage. Should we always plant the local type? Is that going to work better? The answer is, at least from this study, yes, although there are fewer studies that we could look at to understand the results here, but 67% of the time the local source survived best, and 90% of the time they flowered best. Okay, so there's local adaptation. It's not a maybe thing, it's not theoretical, it's very real. But local may not be local anymore. The climate has changed and is continuing to change. I'm showing you some figures of climate change just for Oregon, because that's where I live. And of course, climate change is nuanced across the globe. Warming is going on everywhere, but precipitation changes are varying quite a bit across the globe. It's easier to talk about this in one place. So in Oregon, you can see that it's gotten warmer and it's going to get a lot warmer. We're about a quarter of the way through the century, and if you look at this projection, we're about a quarter of the way through the century's warming, which means we've seen some extreme weather events already in Oregon. We've had a heat dome a couple of years ago. It was intense, where we had temperatures in the teens, 100 and teens. We don't see that in the Pacific Northwest. So that was excruciating. But think about it this way. We're 25% of the way through that climate change. That means we ain't seen nothing yet. Things are changing, and they're going to change a lot more. We don't see our governments changing trajectory on carbon emissions fast enough to ward this off. So we have to pay attention to this from a restoration and a conservation perspective. This is a dominant factor for us. If you look at the bottom panel, it looks like annual precipitation will just continue to vary a little bit over time, and it'll hold pretty steady. But that belies the fact that we will see greater vapor pressure deficit. In other words, even if it stays wet, it will dry out because it's getting hotter. When it's warmer, water evaporates. And that's what plants are going to experience in the soil, as I'm sure all of you know, that when it gets drier, plants have a harder time growing, typically, even in the desert. So we are faced with a changing climate that forces us to start to accommodate restorations with native plants that will be adapted to our changed climate and our changing climate. So that's hard. I'm going to backtrack a little bit and talk about some of the effects that we already know are happening to native plants from climate change to date. Loss of diversity, changes in phenology, in other words, plants blooming earlier, range shifts, species extinctions, and complex interactions with land use. And a salient point here from the literature is that the pace of climate change is about 10 times faster than the pace of migration that we can expect. And some would say that's the same with evolutionary progress. And also some would say it's perhaps 100 times faster than what we're going to see from migration naturally. and from evolution, in large part due to the way seeds are distributed and habitat fragmentation. Plants just aren't everywhere anymore. So diversity is in decline. Here's an example from my home area in southwestern Oregon. This is from a study by some folks that revisited plots by a professor at Cornell in the 1950s named Robert Whitaker, one of the seminal ecologists in the United States. And he looked at these communities in this landscape, and these guys went back to those same areas and put in the same plots and tried to estimate what had changed in 60 years or so. And what they found was diversity had plummeted, absolutely plummeted, from 12 to 14 species per plot down to 3-ish. That's catastrophic. What has happened here? And some of what had happened was species that were at the southern end of their range, northern species, had just died out. And communities that were from southern slopes had moved around towards northern slopes. So things have changed there already in this history, right? And so we're only 25% of the way into our climate change, so think of what might be in store for us. Changes in phenology. Shifts of about 4.4 days earlier in bloom time per degree centigrade is what we're seeing in the Pacific Northwest. But of course, it's nuanced. It's not just across the board. Species that are in low elevation areas and maritime areas, their phenology is advancing faster than species in arid lands or at higher elevations. So there's some complexity to this. It's not, you can't just say everything's happening the same everywhere. Ranges may need to shift with climate change. This is results also from Oregon. This is from a manipulative climate experiment. Take outdoor landscapes, plant prairies, and then put in structures that change temperature and precipitation and see what happens. And among many findings from this really important study are that species that are in their normal place when you heat them up and deprive them of moisture in the way that is expected from climate change, those species tend to die out. So these are currently vibrant prairies, but the genotypes and species that occur there now are fated. It does not look good for them. But also, species that are either genotypes or species from further south, when moved north and applied climate change, they do better. So there's an indication that some species or genotypes will die out as the climate warms, but we also have an invitation to look to the south, in this case, and look at genotypes and species that may do well in this future climate. And so this is real data from real species. Trees. Oh my God, trees. Trees are really useful because everybody can see trees. And we see changes in trees a lot. We don't see changes in some of the other herbaceous plants very much because not as many people are looking. However, that observation by going back to southern Oregon plots and revisiting them, that was an eye-opener, because I don't think even people who worked down there realized how much change had taken place. It's just more subtle. But when it comes to trees, there's a lot we can see. For example, in this study, these researchers went to, I think it was 14,000 study plots from Forest Service data that they evaluated for the abundance of tree seedlings versus adult trees. And what they found was that in the southern hotter areas, seedlings were dying out. The mature trees were doing okay, but they couldn't reproduce. The seedlings were not reproducing. And so that means that at these southern or hotter areas, the distribution of these tree species is being trimmed off. We just haven't seen it happen yet because those trees haven't died. Trees last a long time, but they're not making seedlings. So that's a problem. We also see, with our eyes, tree die-offs. Douglas fir die-off in Oregon and Washington, yellow cedar decline, aspen, the sudden aspen death. These are all direct effects of drought and heat. There are also indirect effects. Pine needle blight, spruce beetle and mountain beetle killing trees. These are indirect effects that climate is weakening trees or expanding the range of pests and pathogens. So these trees are dying in large areas. This is an interesting thing. It's terrible, but it's also important to realize that in massive die-offs, there's an important natural selection event going on. There may be a few individuals that can tolerate these extreme things, and those individuals are crucial. And that's why it's important not to just cut down all the trees after something like this happens. Go ahead and cut down the dead ones maybe, but don't cut down the living ones. They have superpowers. Those are the trees we need to recolonize these landscapes. So the effects of climate change may also depend on land use. And this is from a study we did in partnership with the Bureau of Land Management in Southern Oregon on a rare species called Green's Mariposa lily. And we did a 10-year demographic study. We looked at plots that were grazed by cattle and plots that had been fenced to keep livestock out and other wildlife. And we did computer models to understand what their projected populations growth were likely to be. And what we found was in a grazed environment, both climate change and non-climate change scenarios had populations declining. But if we removed grazing, both climate changed and non-climate changed populations were likely to increase. So the effects of climate change will depend on how we're managing these lands. When we put species or landscapes under stress, it can aggravate the effects of climate change. So how do we source plants for habitat restoration in this changing climate? So, what do? This is one of our opportunities is as seed producers and seed appliers, we get to decide what goes back on the landscape. Really, we get to decide that. We're the ones that do it in this room. So there's local adaptation that's real, but there's also future climate change that's real too, that we need to somehow bring together to bring success to these restorations and make these populations resilient over time. So planning for climate change, there's a lot of different ways to collect seeds, as you all know, and I'm sure you're familiar with all these approaches, right? You can be strictly local. I'm going to only put seeds back onto the site that I collected from this site. There's relaxed, well, I'll go to a few sites, but I'll still put them on my site, but they got to be nearby. There's composite, which is a little more vague, but that means some bigger area where I'll collect and then put those seeds together and then put on maybe several kinds of sites. Admixture, meaning I'm just going to go to every population in the whole freaking range of the species and I'm going to throw them all in a melting pot and put them everywhere and let nature sort it out. And then there's predictive, which is, okay, well, let's be a little more systematic about this. Let's look at where our future climate is likely to be and collect materials from there and put them into our restorations. Okay, well, there's an opportunity here for thinking outside of these boxes, and one approach I'm suggesting is a composite approach that includes future climate analogs, that includes a predictive approach. So a composite mix to start with, and this is what we currently do in the Willamette Valley in Western Oregon, is we collect from multiple sites within a very narrow area. So we've got local adaptation to a particular site, but we also have genetic diversity. So we're in that sweet spot between those two. We want a lot of diversity, but we keep it local, okay? It's great. That's been the conventional wisdom for some time. We need diversity, but we need local. Cool. An example here from Iris tenax, the Oregon iris, and you can see we collect from multiple sites in our ecoregion. This is an ecoregion level 3, but it's the smallest ecoregion in the country, so it's fairly manageable. We're not going large distances. We're maximum 30 miles by 90 miles. It's a pretty limited area. And then we put them into production, and they cross-pollinate, and those seeds now are kind of hyper-diverse genetically, but they're also really local. So this is cool. We like this. But it doesn't do much for climate change. So now let's layer on top of that the idea of thinking about future climate analogs. And the idea there is we're looking ahead to where is our tomorrow climate today? Well, we can go and collect seeds that will then potentially do well in our site in the future or even today. This is a tool that was developed by the Conservation Biology Institute and the U.S. Forest Service and some others. I really like it. It has a major strength and a major weakness. The major strength is that it allows the user to specify a lot of different climate variables that they think are going to be important. And its major weakness is it has a lot of climate variables that allow the user to select which is most important. And that can be hard for a user who just shows up and says, there's a bunch of climate, but which do I pick? We've cheated by going to some of the creators of this and saying, okay, which variables should we pick? And so that's made it more usable for us. But we tend to use variables that have to do with winter freezing temperatures as well as summer drought conditions. Those tend to be the climate variables that limit plant distributions. It's funny, this is slated as for trees, but it's, trees are plants, and these are all climate variables that all plants are responding to. So it really isn't just a tree tool. So if you go there and go, oh, it's for trees, I was going to work on a grass, I don't think that's something you have to worry about. Here's some results from applying this to an area in Western Oregon. We're working with a group from Clean Water Services and the Tualatin River Soil and Water Conservation District. And these groups really want to plant in riparian areas particularly to protect water temperatures in that area. So they have an area they want to work in, and they need long-term resilient woody plants to provide that shade. And so we're working with them to use this tool to now predict, okay, where by mid-century is our tomorrow climate going to be? And we drew this map. Darker orange doesn't mean hotter. It means a better fit, a better match to the climate of the future of that area. Probably is hotter, but it really means a higher quality match. But if you go to the end of this century, you can see that all this stuff sort of in the middle area has gone, and the future climate there is further south. It's concentrated sort of in a subset of what we see in the late century. And it's kind of surprising. This is a hypothesis. This is like, well, maybe this is what will happen. It's our best available science. And so the approach now is to collect plant materials from throughout that area and put them in a common garden up in this Tualatin Valley and essentially do an assisted migration trial to find out, all right, are any of these better than what we got locally? Do we expect to see them do better in the future? We can also take measurements of them to understand, are there characteristics, morphological traits we can look at that are associated with different climate types so that as climate changes, it can help direct us to the right kinds of populations to collect from. So this is a practical approach to the research that can help direct us towards what plant materials to use. I also think that the issue is so urgent that if we wait for all the research, it will be too late for some of these populations. And I'm a little more bold here than some people here will be comfortable with. But I think we need to go on a parallel track with the research and some implementation, starting to mix in genotypes from other areas. I don't mean replacing our current local genotype with something new. I mean stirring in some genes. Because if we need to give those populations something for natural selection to work with. And they may not have all of the climate extremes to work with yet. I think the question is not when should we do that, but how far away and how much should we do it? I think we need to start at least dabbling with that. The science is clear, the recommendations from the literature are clear, but we have not really been doing it yet, and I think it's time. So this is beyond assisted migration. This is what I call this, and this is adaptive sourcing. So we have this local adaptation, we have genetic diversity, where we need to collect locally to leverage the home site advantage, right, where local does best. We also need to collect from multiple sites, but include harsh sites and locations and bad years. This is still local, right? This isn't climate analogs yet. This is just looking even in our valley to the drier sites, the harsher sites, and collecting in those bad years where those genotypes that can handle it still produce seeds. They might not make many, but those seeds, those are the magic beans, right, that are going to grow the beanstalk. But we also, I think, need to be looking for our climate analogs in the future and making those part of the sweet spot, where we're balancing to some degree our local, our extremes, and our climate match, but adjacent climate match. And I don't mean major polycross blends that are across the distribution of the species and say, well, you know, that'll help us with climate change. I mean local with strategic, targeted genotypes from climates we fully expect to become realized in our area. So that's a little different. So some of the sideboards, I mean, let's not go crazy with this, right? There's a risk of over-transfer. You go too far to the south, perhaps, and those genotypes do well here. So we need to consider this and be careful. There's a risk of pest and disease transfer, but we can manage that. We can, if we collect seeds, that eliminates a lot of pests and diseases. Not all, but it eliminates a lot. And we can treat seeds to control disease as well. Mismatched ploidy. So I can't say this in front of most crowds, but this one I think I can. You know, plants may have diploid or tetraploid or hexaploid, polyploid levels. And if you mix populations with these different genetic types, they may not be able to mate well together. And so that could be a problem. So let's pay attention to ploidy so that we don't just, you know, end up with that kind of outbreeding depression. Extreme edaphic differences, you know, something that occurs on serpentine really may not do well on normal soils, or actually the other way around is more likely. Plants from normal soils, may not do well on an extreme edaphic type. So we need to, you know, let's not be stupid about it. There might be taxonomic differences we want to be aware of. There might be a different variety or subspecies in the area. Okay, do we want to go there? Do we want to start mixing in for specific taxa? Probably not at first, but in the long term, that actually might be what we want to do. I mean, many of you studied evolution. Hybridization is a part of how plants have evolved through time. So we shouldn't be too afraid of it, but we should be cautious. Rare species. Okay, let's, you know, if something's an endangered species listed, we may not want to be just blending it out of existence. We need to be very careful with that. So we need sideboards. We need to be paying attention to what we're doing. But I hope you'll at least consider a conversation around how do we bring in genotypes that will give us climate resilience in the long term. So, Alexis, how am I doing on time? A few minutes left. Perfect, that's all I need, really. So, the restoration supply chain. That was my big preaching, so we're gonna get back to some practical stuff here. We're here, the theme of this conference is the restoration supply chain. This is what we do. You know, in some ways, in my mind, the restoration supply chain has one big link in it, and it's seeds. Of course, we know there's more to it than that. There's seed collection, there's scouting, there's cleaning, there's putting it into production, there's cleaning it again, there's getting it certified, there's getting it stored, getting it distributed, coordinating, pricing it, the economy of it. It's an economy we're dealing with. So, you know, this is important, and we're the people that do this economy. And so that's why it's so exciting to think about this as a supply chain issue. And of course, the term supply chain really came into vogue during the pandemic, so it really makes sense to think about it now, because we actually can't do the restoration our landscapes need because we don't have enough seeds. So this is not just the main link, it's kind of the weak link, and we need to strengthen it. We need each other to do that. How do we do that? Well, we need partnerships and collaboratives. So another theme of this conference is native seed partnerships. So I would like to do that. Raise your hand again. If you're with a native seed partnership of any kind, please raise your hand. Wow, great, throughout the room. So these seed partnerships are changing how we get seeds out there, because seed partnerships are made lots of different ways, but many of them work directly with industry and with practitioners. It's a way for us to say, What do we need? How are we going to get it produced? Let's pool our resources and our knowledge and make it happen. The need for these seeds is national. There's a huge variation in how partnerships are doing it. And I think that's great. It's rich, but we can learn from each other. Some models may not be working as well as others. Let's figure out how we learn from success and spread that. Partnerships can, this conference is our opportunity to share how we've done it, what are the innovations we've done together to make this happen, and we've got sessions on seed partnerships, so if you're interested in that, please go to those. Here's a map showing the seed partnerships that we know of at the Institute for Applied Ecology that we're hoping to promote through the Native Seed Network website. If your dot isn't on here, please come to registration. We'd love to get information from you. And not just a dot, really we'd like to get a red line on the map. What is the region you serve or hope to gather people within? So this is, when we started doing this in near 2002, there weren't any seed partnerships that we knew of. And now there are some that have been out there for over a decade, and many that are coming online right now. So it's just really exciting to see. But we have an opportunity to coordinate with each other. Some more actions. So I'm suggesting that we start blending in climate-adapted genotypes, if appropriate. We improve and solidify our regional partnerships. We take advantage of the opportunities created by the 30 by 30 Executive Order, America the Beautiful, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the Inflation Reduction Act. Those funding sources are unprecedented for this kind of effort. So I'm looking to all of us and pleading with policymakers to consider how we focus this on this problem, how we focus it on infrastructure to build seed storage facilities, increase the volume of seeds being produced, interagency seed readiness. In other words, get a cooperative facility for federal agencies like the national the fire centers, building capacity with tribal nations, and improving agency staffing and including tribal liaisons, shared equipment, support for non-governmental partners, and online tools. We need those. And on the Native Seed website, we now have a page that just lists tools, so that if you're like, I don't know how to pick the right seeds, we don't have all the tools, but that website has a page that can direct you to those. So we're trying to be a hub for that as well. And then there's the National Seed Strategy. This is an important document that started in 2015, but it is up for renewal, and it needs to be renewed. And part of what it called for was a national assessment of seeds, and that's been concluded. So that report has a lot of recommendations. It's crucial. We need to look at that. We need to implement that. So that is where I will leave off, except by saying the Native Seed Network is a website that used to have a lot of functionality, but over time, some gaps in funding, and as websites changed and couldn't support the tools we had, it lost much of its functionality. But we're going to renew it and relaunch it. But that functionality includes the ability to say, here I am on the landscape, here's the species I want, who can sell that to me? Give me more information about that species. Or here I am on the landscape, what species do I need? So that functionality will be built back into this so that it's a tool that anyone can use, government agency, other practitioners, et cetera. The data are available, we just need to package them appropriately. One thing we do need, though, is to refresh and renew our relationships with producers, those of you that are producers that sell seeds. We need the information from you so that we can put it on this website to drive business to you. That's part of the economy here. This is a catalyst for the seed industry. So I'll conclude there by saying, all we are saying is give seeds a chance. So thank you very much. All right. do we have time for questions, or should we put that off? Okay, we're not going to do questions now. Instead, I'm going to introduce to you the Director of the United States Bureau of Land Management, Tracy Stone Manning. In September 2021, Tracy Stone Manning was confirmed as the 19th District Director of the Bureau of Land Management. Tracy Stone Manning has spent her career devoted to public service and conservation, bringing people together to solve the biggest challenges facing our lands and waters. Before coming to the BLM, Stone Manning served as both a senior advisor for conservation policy and associate vice president of public lands at the National Wildlife Federation. Before joining the Federation, she served as former Montana Governor Steve Bullock's chief of staff, where she helped broker bipartisan legislation, including delivering health care to nearly 100,000 Montanans by expanding Medicaid and passing a water compact with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. She also helped launch the state's first Office of Outdoor Recreation. Prior to that, Stone Manning worked as the director of Montana's Department of Environmental Quality, overseeing the state's water, air, mining, and remediation programs. She served as a senior advisor and regional director to Senator John Tester during his first term, where she worked primarily on natural resource issues. Raised in a big Navy family, she was guided into public service from childhood. She's an avid backpacker, hunter, and singer, and holds a MS in Environmental Studies from the University of Montana and a BA from the University of Maryland. And I hope she sings a song for us today. Thank you, Tracy.
There will be no singing. It is too early in the morning. I have to say I'm a little bit daunted to be here. Tom gave me a lovely introduction as the director of the Bureau of Land Management, but as you heard, my home is Montana, and in Missoula I'm known as that woman who, when she moves around to different houses, digs up her Kentucky bluegrass and plants natives. And Tom, I have to say that I think the kindest way to describe what my husband and I do is add mixture, like throw it out there. And it might have been a bridge too far for our most recent home when we cut down the red maple and planted a ponderosa pine. But I love it, and I'm looking forward to going home and seeing it here shortly. Thank you, everybody, for having me here today. It's truly an honor to visit with you and share the efforts of the Bureau of Land Management on behalf of native seed conservation. We're working on this important issue not only because it's the right thing to do, but because we need seeds to be successful in the restoration work we do. And we'll be doing even more of that restoration work because of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. The possibility before us is incredible for the beginning of transformational change. Our work to protect and restore healthy landscapes, ensure wildlife biodiversity, and make our lands more resilient to the growing impacts of climate change will not be successful without native seed, genetic instruction from nature, the planet's very best engineer. I first learned the power of native seed about 20 years ago. I ran a local watershed group called the Clark Fork Coalition, and we had successfully advocated for the removal of a dam at the confluence of the Blackfoot and Clark Fork rivers. That dam was the terminus of a Superfund site, and there were 23 feet of toxic sediments behind the dam. Made the most sense to haul out the sediments, remove the dam. And as folks were putting together the restoration for the confluence of those two rivers, you know, as you can imagine, there was a lot of work going into trying to recreate a confluence, and a lot of thought from botanists about what should be there. And after a year or so of monitoring, some botanists went out into the field and said, hold on a second, what is that? And the answer was, it was a plant from a seed that had been buried under those sediments over 100 years earlier. Like 100 years of sitting in an anaerobic environment, and you give it a little bit of oxygen and a little bit of sunlight, and talk about an endemic species. So for me, it was this remarkable lesson in humility. Nature knows more than us. Tom talked about the migration of plants and trying to get it right, and my urgent plea to all of you is to carry some humility to that process, because we're going to get it wrong sometimes, and we're going to have to learn from those mistakes and also learn from our successes. So as you're aware, the conservation challenges are exacerbated not only by climate change, as what we've just heard, but the complex interactions of ecosystems and disruption. We're not just addressing the impacts of increasing frequency and intensity of wildfires, droughts, and floods, but simultaneously the threats posed by increasing invasive species. In working to meet these challenges head-on, the BLM recognizes that native plants are the natural infrastructure we have to rely upon for healthy, biodiverse ecosystems. They protect us against natural disasters. They create habitat for wildlife, rare species, and pollinators, and they're vital for carbon sequestration. Native plants also contain the genes needed for food security in a changing climate, conferring drought tolerance, salt tolerance, and pest resistance. Without native plants and seeds, we will not have the ability to restore healthy, functional ecosystems after natural disasters and mitigate the effects of climate change. I think that last sentence bears repeating, even though many people in this room, everyone in this room understands it to be true. Without native plants, especially native seeds, we will not have the ability to restore healthy, functional ecosystems in an age of climate change. To some in this room, it might be news that the Bureau of Land Management is a global leader in the effort to increase native seed development. It stands to reason. We're the country's largest land management agency, responsible for 1 in 10 acres in this country, some 245 million acres that expand from the Arctic tundra in Alaska down to Jupiter Island off of Florida. We're also the largest purchaser and user of native seeds in the Western Hemisphere. The BLM seed warehouse system has purchased 54 million pounds of seeds in the past 25 years. In a high fire year like 2007, upwards of 7 million pounds of seeds can be purchased. The amount of native seeds being requested and purchased has only continued to increase. But at the same time, there's been drastic decline in our botanical capacity. The number of botanists at the BLM employs has decreased 60% over the past 10 years, which hurts my heart. Know that we are in the middle of a workforce planning assessment to figure out what the Bureau needs for our work ahead. I'm guessing that we're going to need a lot of botanists, so usajobs.gov, everyone. For the BLM, investing in coordinated, research-driven native seed production is, of course, a given. It represents an efficient and cost-efficient nature-based solution for improving the resilience of landscapes in the face of climate change and the extinction crisis. For many years now, the BLM and its partners have been collaborating to increase the supply of native seeds for restoration through the National Seed Strategy for rehabilitation and restoration, to get the right seed in the right place at the right time. To address these challenges in a strategic and comprehensive way, the BLM commissioned the first ever independent native seed assessment by the National Academies of Sciences. You're here, thank you very much for that work. The recommendations in their recently issued final report represent a timely opportunity for the BLM and partners to improve our native seed science policy and coordination in a way that captures the size, scale, and true urgency of the challenges. It comes at a critical moment as we invest hundreds of millions of dollars in restoration of public lands in our care that's been made possible by the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Given the incredible diversity of landscapes, natural resources, and stakeholders across the country that are involved in this effort, effective coordination is really no small task. Implementing the native seed strategy takes hundreds of people working together across the Department of Interior bureaus, the Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Defense. That looks a little like this. We're signing an interagency MOU with the National Park Service and the Fish and Wildlife Service on Seeds of Success, the National Wildland Native Seed Collecting Program. Our plant conservation and restoration program continues to work with over 150 federal agencies, state agencies, tribal nations, NGOs, and the private sector to implement the native seed strategy. Some of these partners include the Navajo Nation, Society for Ecological Restoration, Oregon State University, and other tribal nations, universities, botanic gardens, and conservation groups. We look forward to continuing to leverage these important partnerships and updating you on our progress. I have to say it again, we would be nowhere without our partners, so thank you to all of you in the room. And of course, all the talk and good intentions in the world won't get us where we need to go. The Biden-Harris administration is putting real resources to the effort. The bipartisan infrastructure law alone has directed $200 million to implement the National Seed Strategy, $70 million for the Department of Interior, and $130 million for the Department of Ag. Our 2023 budget also provides significant funding to make native plant seeds available for large-scale restoration of wildlife habitat and native plant communities. And we're not just working on collecting and growing seed, we're protecting the ability for natural dispersal and migration. We recently issued policy directing the field to identify and protect vital wildlife corridors in areas of habitat connectivity that will also benefit native plants and ecosystems, because as you all know, native plants need corridors too. The White House Council on Environmental Quality is echoing our policy, issuing new guidance to federal agencies to better incorporate ecological connectivity and wildlife corridors into federal decision-making and planning. This guidance highlights the importance of connectivity across terrestrial, marine, and freshwater habitats, encouraging collaboration across management and ownership boundaries with states, tribes, local governments, and private landowners. This helps deliver on one of the America the Beautiful initiative's 6 early focus areas, supporting collaborative conservation of fish and wildlife habitat and corridors. The BLM will also soon release a proposed rule for updating and modernizing the tools and strategies for better managing our public lands for landscape health and resilience in a time of climate change. Finally, the BLM is working closely with tribes across the country on behalf of historic co-stewardship agreements that represent win-wins for people and conservation. In Montana, we're collaborating with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes and the Nature Conservancy on restoring important native plants with a focus on camas, bitterroot, and whitebark pine. Of course, that's a keystone species that's listed under the Endangered Species Act, largely due to climate change. I trust and hope you all know that the BLM is a committed partner and collaborator on behalf of conserving and protecting not just native seeds, but landscapes and natural resources for current and future generations. If we don't do this work together, collectively we risk failing the future. The efforts and partnerships we forge today will have a profound impact on the West in the coming years, and we do not take that responsibility lightly. I'm so grateful to you all for all the intense focus and passion you bring to bear on this topic. Your passion for native seeds, for native plants, and the landscapes we all cherish transforms into work that is truly going to benefit the future. I have quite a few colleagues in the room. BLMers, will you please raise your hand and/or stand? BLMers in the house, yay. Please seek these folks out at the break. We've also got a booth for any questions that you have about our work and where we're headed in our restoration and native plant program. It's been a remarkable opportunity to be among you today. Truly, please know I'm going to take this energy into the room. I'm going to take this energy into the United States House of Representatives budget hearing tomorrow with me and channel it. Truly, truly, thank you for your work, and thank you for the time to share some words with you today.
Thank you very much, Tracy. And we just have some housekeeping remarks, and then we'll get on with our day. But before that, we've already done some thank yous, but I need to do one here now. And we've had a team of folks put on this conference.
but the person who's really led it and really made the logistics come together is Alexis Larsen, and I'm grateful. And in that vein, Alexis now is going to tell us what to do.
Well, we're ending a little early, so we'll get an extra long break. There's refreshments in the lobby. And then if you're a moderator and a speaker this morning, please check in with the room and the AV station to get presentations uploaded, and the moderator guidelines are there as well. And if you have questions, we're wandering around so we can assist with that. And then just to note that we will be recording sessions in this ballroom and the right room. If you're a speaker and you do not want to be recorded, please check in with the AV folks as well about that. But I think Morgan checked in with you first. So I think that's it. So I think we'll take an extended break. Thank you.